So tell me all about your poetry parties that you held last year.
Well, I tell you, the idea of Poetry Together came about because I was challenged about my love of poetry. Somebody said to me, "Oh, you bang on about how poetry is good for you. It's good for you, Gyles. We know you love it. We know you know lots of poems by heart, but it's actually good for everybody." And I thought, well, let me inquire. Let me make some, it's an easy thing to say, poetry is good for us, but is it? And I began some interesting research. And I found myself at the memory laboratory meeting a lot of neuroscientists in Cambridge University. And they were doing work on babies. In fact, they were doing research into trying to find out about the background to dyslexia. But anyway, incidentally, they found out other things. And one of the things they discovered was this, that if you speak poetry to a baby before it's born and shortly after it's born, you will help that baby with its language skills by speaking rhythmical poetry to a baby before it's born and when it's born. You will help it to speak better and sooner, wait for it to read better and sooner, and wait for it to write better and sooner. Poetry makes a difference to a newborn baby. Extraordinary. I then went to the other end of the spectrum, and I discovered, didn't really surprise me, that learning poetry by heart benefits older people, people of my generation. That if you learn a poem by heart, it helps keep the synapses active. And I thought, well, this is very intriguing. Children is good for them. Poetry is good for them. The rhythm of poetry is lovely for them. Words are wonderful things. And for older people, they're lovely. Why don't we bring the two together? And so Poetry Together, it's a rambling way of telling you this story, for which I apologize, but Poetry Together came about because I thought, why don't we get children and older people together to share poetry, to learn poetry by heart? It's good for both of them. And then to have a tea party and tea, cake, and a poetry slam. And we did it last year, 2019, and some 300 schools and care homes around the country took part. And it was very successful. And I went to some of these sessions and they were very moving because it was just lovely to see the communication between the older people and the younger people.
How is it going to change for this year, for 2020? How can we make this work now? Because the scenes you're describing are beautiful, but won't quite work this year.
Exactly. So we got ourselves all geared up in February, March. We had a brilliant start. Let's get going in 2020. And then along comes lockdown. And during lockdown, one becomes increasingly aware of loneliness for older people and frustration for younger people. My grandchildren were very frustrated. I mean, homeschooling. Oh, I am so sympathetic. The great thing about this year is it has made people value the teaching profession as never before. I have to tell you, people like my son and daughters and my in-laws, my daughters-in-law, my son-in-law, they are so grateful to the teacher. They couldn't wait for the schools to reopen. They are so grateful. They realize how exhausting it is being a teacher because they've tried it. It's a nightmare. So there were kids getting frustrated and there were old people feeling lonely. So we thought, well, let's keep doing this. Let's try and do this online. So what we're doing between now and the end of November is we are encouraging care homes, old folks homes, residential places for older people to get together, choose a poem, learn it by heart and perform it. About 60 seconds, really, that's all you need. A sonnet, 14 lines, that takes about 60 seconds to read. A short poem, a fun, interesting, fun, serious, sad, whatever you like. And then get in touch with a local school and get them to do the same thing with the same poem. The point is, you can share poems. It's a fun thing to do. And so between now and the end of November, we're encouraging, if you're a teacher watching this or reading this, it's a fun way. I mean, the great thing about learning poetry is it's not difficult. It really isn't. You can learn, anyone, whatever your age, you can learn 2 lines of poetry. Granny, I can teach you 2 lines of poetry now. I will do so. Repeat after me. There once was a man from Peru.
There once was a man from Peru.
Whose limerick stopped at line 2.
Whose limerick stopped at line 2.
There you are. You've learned a complete poem. There once was a man from Peru whose limerick stopped at line 2. It is 2 lines. They are very silly, but you can learn them immediately. And if you learn 2 lines a day, literally 2 lines, no more, then the next day you repeat those 2 lines and then give yourself 2 more lines. Within a week, you've learned a sonnet. So it isn't that difficult to do. So if you are a teacher and I'm encouraging you to encourage your kids, socially distance or whatever you have to do, to perform a poem, and you can then, as it were, film it, pop it up on online, hashtag Poetry Together 2020, and there we are. That's the way to do it. And we're going to do a lucky dip at the end of November, and the ones that we like the best, or we want things the most fun, or got something different about them, we're going to invite them to a tea party sometime next year when we can all get together. And we're getting older people to do the same thing in their old folks' homes.